Hello and welcome to Beyond the Margins. I'm your host, Jason. This is my friend Chavisa. Chavisa, I just want to let everybody know that we've met and talked a couple of times, and really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. But I want to give you the time to let our viewers know a little bit more about you. So if you wouldn't mind, just feel free to share whatever you are comfortable sharing.
Hi, Jason. Thanks so much for having me on your show, and thanks for the opportunity to share the work that I do. So I'm a Chavisa. I'm on the unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, known as Vancouver in Canada. And we start with the land acknowledgement because this is about power relations, and this is about acknowledging some of our histories. The work that I do is as a trauma-informed coach and consultant. That means I specialize in working with folks who are experiencing trauma, who are living with trauma, who have experienced trauma, and who live with trauma as an ongoing state. And so in the work that I do, I specialize in bad divorces and high conflict divorces. So I'm a certified divorce coach in addition to my master's degree and other education. But I chose becoming a certified divorce coach because the area that I absolutely love to work in is around supporting people who are experiencing gender-based violence, hidden abuse, post-separation abuse, and financial abuse. So these are the more invisible types of abuse. When we think of violence against women, traditionally we think of physical and sexual violence. I don't specialize in that area. The area I specialize in is the long, more invisible abuses like hidden abuse and post-separation abuse. And so when you and I met, I thought, what a beautiful opportunity to have a conversation about how to give people more support and just bring awareness to this. A big part of my practice is destigmatizing trauma. And so I always do an evidence-based practice that's grounded, that's holistic and grounded in professional and lived expertise.
So, so what drove you towards this particular field? Why were you drawn towards trauma-informed counseling?
So I'm not a counselor. So I don't work as a counselor, a lawyer, or a financial planner. What I do is I serve as a coach. This is a more postmodern term. And what I like about coaching is that there's a lot more that I can do with people because I can work with them in the immediacy of what they're dealing with. And especially for the folks that I work with, they're dealing with such complicated situations. And so I work with people and I help them with strategy and navigation, problem solving, and making informed decisions. My background is I have a master's degree in qualitative research, methodology and practice, and then social determinants of health and death and dying. So I amalgamated those things together in an interdisciplinary way. And for most of the last decade, I worked in health research. And so I had a really good understanding of like community-driven solutions that the community identified for themselves as solutions to the health problems that were impacting them. And so based on that, when I had my own experience of extended acute gender-based violence, part of what helped me get through that traumatic experience that I had is I treated myself like a work file, and I used all my amazing work skills of research and finding evidence and figuring out how to strategize and figuring out how to navigate systems and system navigation and problem solving. And I used that to apply to my own experience of gender-based violence. And slowly I was able to chip away at this enormous task and make my way through it. And at the time, my lawyer just kept saying to me, I'm not going to help you with that. You go do it. And I'm like, what? You're going to leave me, just little old me, to do this enormous task? And she's like, you go do it. And so I did. I went and negotiated with banks. I went and negotiated with lawyers. I went and negotiated with board of directors. And over time, I was like, I'm getting really good at this. Like, I'm making some serious headway. And I managed in my situation to unravel situations that judges couldn't figure a way out of. And I chipped away and I unraveled and I figured how to make this work. And so over time, I was like, I'm really good at this. And what also became really clear to me is that people going through this, well, twofold. Nonprofits are overloaded with people coming in, but they're dealing with the acute cases around physical and sexual violence. And so the people having these long, extended experiences, they don't get as many resources. But the other thing that I realized is that people going through these long, extended experiences, often they become very depleted and isolated, and people don't understand the situations they're in. You know, it's like you're a teacher, so you'll get this. But it's like from grade 4 and 5 onwards, we're taught we live in a democracy. If you need help, call the police department. There's a justice system. So, what happens as an adult when you need the police department or the justice system, or you need the systems that you've been enculturated in to work? And then you realize, oh, this has gone like ass over tea kettle. It's gone wild. And you think to yourself, everything I grew up with, which was like the foundations of the society that I conceptualized, it's perforating, you know, for people who are experiencing institutional violence, for people who are experiencing bureaucratic overload, for people who are dealing with institutions being misused. It's disorienting. And so to have someone like me who's made their way through this tunnel and understands the research on it and understands the lived experience of it, to be able to have a person like in my position be able to help you navigate, like, hey, you feel like you're lost here and we're going to just get you to this spot and then you can rest. And then this is like, you know, who understands the terrain and can walk you through the terrain, makes a huge difference for people because it brings down their stress levels. I use the word echolocation. I live near the ocean, so I love the term. Are you familiar with the term echolocation?
Yes, indeed. Yes, yes.
So
Bats and dolphins, right?
yeah, and this is what whales do. They let off a
Whales, yes.
vibration so that another whale 400 kilometers away is like, I know where you are. I know how you are. I know what's going on. And that's what I do is I echolocate to my clients so they know they know someone knows they're going through court. They know someone knows their legal paperwork's going in. They know they've had a really tough sorry, I'm not speaking clearly. I know that they are, you know, waiting on a big decision, or I know they've just done something that's hard for them, that's super brave for them. And so I can check in with them and echolocate with them. And so it brings the temperature down and it helps them get grounded. They're not alone and isolated.
That's beautiful. I didn't understand. I'm so glad you explained it because I didn't understand it that way. And it's actually a very beautiful thing that you're there to be a guide to somebody during a time when they really need a guide. Most of us that would have to experience that are walking blindly through it and bumping into walls. And that is very beautiful. And um, I wanted to bring up something I've read recently that I found very bothersome. And the thing that made me think about it was we were discussing gender based violence. It was a meme that I think I saw on Facebook, and I read it to the girls here, and because I wanted to know, it was things that every woman's done, and it was things like walking with your keys in your hand, pretending to be on the phone, ducking into some place because you weren't sure if somebody was following you. And I asked them, I said, tell me how many of these things you've done. And there was probably 7 or 8 things on the list. And I was expecting them to say a couple or what. They just said yes. I found this very upsetting and I get choked up when I think about it. Excuse me. I found this very upsetting because of all the women that have ever been around me, I've always felt that they were comfortable because they knew I would protect them. They didn't even have to be my friends. If I knew them, I was going to make sure they were physically safe. And even if I could do that, even if I did do that, now I'm thinking about all the times I wasn't there and all the times that they had to think like that. And what do we have to do to make this stop? Where can, well, we were talking about it. Where can guys like me go where we can talk and help people and spread the things that need to be spread and let people know that we're genuine when we're talking.
So this is my sort of take. And I thank you for raising this because I think it's a really tender space, but a really beautiful invitation. And I think it's like of critical importance. So I'm so glad as a female, the opportunity to talk to you as a man and have this kind of a beautiful, wholesome, hearty conversation. So just express gratitude to you. So I think the first part is don't listen to the words. Watch the actions, right? The actions are indicative of what's going on. Listening to words, I care about you, I love you, you're important to me, the behavior will tell you, right? So that's really important, is to walk your values in terms of behaviors. And I think as females, we're enculturated to do high safety, hold the keys in your hand in a certain way, be really careful, on alert when you park in a parkade, like always kind of watching your back. And so when I work with women, I always encourage them, trust your intuition. Like, we know so much more than our cognitive, logical brains. Our bodies are picking up information. If we can trust our intuition, we're in so much more of an empowered state. But in terms of gender, I think it's super important for men to use their privilege and use their power and use their innate capacity to extend care to the people around them. And so I think there's so many invitations to do that. So one is to be aware that we're enculturated with gender differently. And so I'd be able to identify what kind of particularly gendered skills you're given that I wasn't necessarily brought up with, and be able to gift those to people appropriately, like it makes a big difference, those kind of gendered things, or what the differences are, to be able to gift those to another person thoughtfully. So that's one space. But I think the other is, stay engaged, talk to people, have these kind of heartfelt conversations, because they really do build bridges and they build connections. But not only talk to the adults around you, but talk to the kids around you. And you get this as a teacher, like when we talk to young men about feelings, that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be upset. These are normal feeling states. And how do we befriend our feeling states and come to hold space for them? Then they're not so scary to us. Then they don't necessarily overtake us. And we can say, oh, there's immense sorrow coming through my system, and you can speak about it. And when you can speak about it, then you can hold space for another person, but you can also enculturate that it's normal. And so the more we teach people emotional literacy and emotional intelligence, then that's a gift that they can share with their networks, right? Over time. So I think mentorship of those kind of things, but I think building bridges, allyship, and gifting people skill sets that you have. But I also think, like you said, protection, but we need protection by also speaking up. And when you experience something that's untoward, or you see a situation going south, like if you feel safe, please say something, so that, we don't have to. And I think it makes a real difference for other men to speak to other men about what's reasonable behavior. It's funny, like I'm thinking to myself about, like, this is a total aside, but I work with people rebuilding their lives. So I work with people as they're like looking at dating and stuff like that. And if you look at online dating, some of the behavior is so atrocious. And
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
as a female, I don't want to receive the atrocious behavior. It actually, to my mind, it should actually be another man who's like, hey, dude, don't do that. Because actually, when this misbehaving behavior, then other men who are lovely, they're impacted by this negative man's behavior. And more to the big picture of around gender-based violence, often this is like, as a society, we think of it as a female problem, gender-based violence. But no, this is our problem, right? If something happens to me and you're my partner, you're going to hear about it. You're going to emotionally experience it. You're going to have all the feeling states come up around what I've had to endure and go through. And so men are impacted. Their moms are impacted. Their aunties are impacted. Their girlfriends are impacted. And so wouldn't it be amazing if men said, this is a personal issue to me. I'm impacted by gender-based violence, and I don't want to see other men doing this behavior because it actually negatively impacts me as a man. And I think that's how it rolls out. What do you think?
No, and I'll say it because I can think of dear friends and, in fact, students that I've had that it did impact me. So I have been affected by gender based violence just because I care about people. And those people I care about have directly been affected by it. And almost everything I relate now is, of course, to my students because that's who I have the most contact with. But I have boys that show emotion in my room because they know it's safe. And I hope that expands out. I mean, the older I get, the more emotional I get. But and they don't have to be like me. But the fact that they can express themselves and they know it's okay, and the girls in the classroom reinforce that because they want that from the boys. They're not mocking them for the behavior. They're telling them it's okay. Are you okay? Instead, which is beautiful. I don't know how it is in even other classrooms. Really, I only hang out in my own, but I'd like to think it's happening more places. And if it is, maybe that dream that we have is starting to be fulfilled. Maybe these children are going to be the ones that do it the right way this time, actually care for each other. And we can hope, we can try and guide them that way. And we can talk here so that when they're a few years older, they can watch it and remember what we said. But I want people to become more activists, like you're saying, and that's something that I wasn't good at. I was. I constantly talk about this now. I was never racist. I was never homophobic or transphobic. It's not who I am. It's not part of me. But I was never anti those things because I didn't know what that was. I didn't know it meant I had to speak out. And I'm a defender. When I was a kid, when I was in my teens, I fought everything. We were fighting racism and apartheid and homelessness and all that stuff. And we were battling. We were Gen Xers. We were ready to take it down. And then we kind of took a nap. And then recently, we've heard our younger siblings, we've heard the millennials, and we've heard the Gen Z, and we've heard them calling us and saying, guys, things are bad here. We need help. We know what you did way back then. We don't know how to do what you did. And so I said, well, it's time to put the jean jacket on and wake up the rest of the crew. Time to come up from the woods. We got to get this done. And I'm meeting so many people in that process, like you. I'm meeting so many awesome people, and they're just people that need their voices to be amplified more. They need to be heard more. We need a wall of voices to stop all the crap.
So it's funny, like you're in a different context than me. So, but I can just respond to what I'm hearing. So you're framing this as a fight, and I frame it differently. Like I do my work for two reasons. I like to see justice on earth. I don't experience justice on earth, and I'd like to see it on earth so I can do my life's practice to bring that forward. And then the second thing is I'm here to love. I'm maybe a little bit odd. My number one intention with my clients is I'm there to love them. For other purposes, I say, I'm here to help you problem solve, and I'll walk you through it. But ultimately, the driver is love. So it comes from a different space, right? I'm not fighting, I'm loving. And and so it changes the energy, and it also changes out the ripple effect, to my mind. And then
No,
the
I
other,
agree. I agree.
yeah. And then the second thing is this idea of like, how can we live our values with in a self-sustaining way that has a beautiful ripple out effect, right? And it's like we've amalgamated a lot of information and experiences by the time we're our age. And so then it's like about how to weave it together and how to pull those threads through and infuse it in. And so I think there's a lot to be said about just like calm leadership by example, and just sharing your gifts and your capacity with the world. I mean, you said it yourself, as a teacher, your students open up in your space, and that's the only space you're responsible for. So in that way, like my thinking is just let your light shine in your space, and then you can see the kids are responding well, right? And you can see that they're becoming a deeper state of themselves.
No, I agree. I think the terminology is different. I think that the heart is the same because I guess when I'm referring to fight, it's more of the energy behind it because I'm not, um, unless I'm talking like that, I'm not a high energy person ever. But I feel like I need to get my energy up so that I can reach out to the people that I want to reach out to. I'm more about education than anything else. And it's probably because I'm a teacher again, I suppose. But the people that I want the people that I want to fight against, I don't really want to fight against them. I want to educate them. I want them to understand. Because I feel like that is a lot of issue is the way that we're taught things. And when we're taught in a way that leads us into a cycle, which I'm sure you're aware can be hard to break. I mean, I've seen them broken. I've seen them get better. I've seen some bad cycles break. But I think education had to come into that first on how to break it. I suppose that would be kind of what I was thinking coaching would be as somebody that was educating people on that. And that's how I felt when you said you were guiding them through. So different. Maybe I should change my words because I don't want people to perceive it that way. So I'll have to think about that too.
I
Because you're right, that I don't want it to seem violent at all.
So I do work a lot with education. Like I all my work is evidence based. I love reading theory. You know, my idea of a good time is lying down on the couch and reading a nice thick stack of theory because I love like peer reviewed manuscripts, and I'm constantly sweeping for that stuff. So it's like I love reading what the UN has to say, and what like I read Supreme Court documents as my treat. So, like I'm constantly reading and pulling up contemporary data and contemporary practices. But in terms of education, like the work that I do is extremely personalized. So to the person. So I always do like a call for people at the beginning to make sure that I can be effective with them and make sure that I can help them and improve their situations. So once I've identified the person who's called in, I can assist them. Then I do education with them because, again, a lot of the folks that I'm serving, it's like they they aren't able to get sufficient support from their family and friends or colleagues. And part of that is what I was talking about earlier, is that we've been enculturated from a very young age that the justice system works. If you need a hand, these are the people to call. And so when you're experiencing a tangle, and so the thing is, gender-based violence is in Canada drives 23% of the divorces. So the area I work in is very closely connected. So divorce is like an irregular experience for most humans. They might do it one or two times in their lives, at most three times in their lives. So, but each time is unique. So it's not like you have comparable terrain or you get familiar with this. Whereas I've studied divorce and I understand the terrain of it. So I'm comfortable there and I'm not scared in that space. But the other piece is around education, that like people are not, often by the time they find me, they don't have enough support. They don't have enough support for family and friends, or the kind of support they're getting is, you just need a good lawyer. And it's like, it's way beyond, I just need a good lawyer. Like the situation is way more complicated than that. So often what happens is when well-meaning friends and family give these kind of like suggestions, what actually ends up happening for the person who receives it is like, it reiterates to them, this person doesn't understand where I am. They don't get what's going on and they can't help me. And so inadvertently, what I find often is it'll amplify the isolation. You know, that intended support actually amplifies the isolation, which is where someone like me who's not scared of the terrain, who's already been through the terrain, I'm very realistic with my people. I don't tell them like, I walk them through and I say, like, this is in our control. This is out of our control. There's a whole bunch of forces here. This is how this dynamic works. So we'll do the best we can, but we have to understand, like, the best we can do is articulate yourself in a calm, grounded manner, be clear about the terrain, and understand all the factors at play. And then we just have to kind of like let it unfold, right? And do the absolute best we can to navigate the unfolding of the situation. But other people think it's more like binary or black and white in how they're perceiving it. So I try and be very realistic with people and hold that space for the discomfort of uncertainty, for the uncomfortable feelings, that states that arise, so that at least, again, it's this echolocating. It's about being realistic and just telling people, like, listen, whatever happens, you have accompaniment, and I'm happy to stay with you through this long process, however it unfolds. And so there's not a pressure, and also people can start to digest. And also once people have support, then they can in some way get some rest, because we need to recuperate, we need to rest, and we need to be able to grieve, because trauma always brings about grieving. And trauma usually brings about grieving so many levels of our lives, you know?
Yeah, and indeed it does. I was thinking when you were talking about, we were talking about gender-based violence, and you were talking about taking people down the path, and you were saying that a lot of times they'll have family who's saying, "Oh, just go do this process, or just go, get a lawyer or whatever." So what that sounds like to me is invalidation, and that's something I've only recently learned about when I've been talking to other kinds of assault survivors. So do you see that frequently in gender-based violence as well, where families and friends will invalidate the victim when they try to cry out?
I mean, I can say only in my personal circumstance, absolutely. Like, I received letters from family members telling me how much they love my abuser. Like, when I was in a state of acute violence, and I'm receiving letters saying they absolutely love him. I mean, it makes for some, so this is where I think I say I really love loving people who work with me, is because they're experiencing a trauma, but then there's all these other striations of trauma that are happening. There's the perforation of family, perforation of friends, perforation perhaps at the workplace, financial, there's so many layers of complexity underway. It's not like this is like a one hit issue that just stays here. It has a ripple out effect, and it really, really impacts people. And so often as people are digesting and metabolizing trauma, a lot of change happens, because, like, for example, in my case, the family member who absolutely loved my abuser, like, that's not useful family, right? So then my family configuration over many years changed because out of necessity. So, and also just out of like, again, people who've experienced violence, it's really important to come into reality. So again, this piece around how we're enculturated and like taking off the rosy tinted glasses of like hoping everybody's good, trusting everybody, imagining that everybody has our best interest. It's like, actually take off the rose tinted glasses. You have to protect yourself. You have to kind of choose good people who come into your inner circle. Actually, having people who don't look after you, they're not useful in your inner circle. Like, we have to recalibrate how we're envisioning our lives. And often that's the invitation. And that's a major recalibration that happens for people who lived with violence is they're experiencing an unwanted invitation to recalibrate their lives. And so the configuration of their lives shifts over time.
I feel like there's so much that we could talk about, so many different branches we could go down, and that I want to talk to you again. I think we'll plan to talk again. That I do want, pardon me, I do want just to ask, and please at your comfort level always, okay? Would you share any part of your personal story that you would be comfortable sharing?
Well, I can say that in my personal experience, I experienced post separation abuse. So I had left the person. I knew the relationship wasn't working. And so I had left and I was on my way making my own life and standing on my own 2 feet and reconfiguring my life. And that was part of what was so daunting about the experience is that I'd never heard of post separation abuse. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know that was. So when I started my major, I like to refer to it as my unwanted PhD. So when I got my unwanted PhD in gender-based violence, what I learned is that post-separation abuse is about control and coercion. It's about when another person starts becoming autonomous and standing on their own 2 feet and being independent, then a person who is unwell, who would prefer to be able to control and at any costs, then they can be challenged and they can be wanting to exert control over the other person at any means. And I mean, coercive control is at the crux of what we're talking about here. And that's what violence is. It's about wanting to manage and control another person. And so I'd already commenced my own life and I had my own space and I was doing my own life. And I had another person who decided that they would try and level me and made use of their privilege to go and exact harm. And it created everything I knew about the world fell apart. So what happened that was unusual in my case, and I've always kind of scratched my head on, is that most violence is invisible. It's invisibilized unless you leave DNA behind. And so what happened in my situation is that I didn't have the opportunity to be silent. Entered into an acute emergency within a few hours, and I needed help from absolutely everyone in my community. And so I was very public within the first 24 hours that I needed help from everybody. And so everybody knew something was going horrifically wrong for me. And everybody knew that there was an emergency underway. And so I never was given the opportunity to have silence or discretion or shame. And because of that, what happened is also because of like my research background is I realized, oh, wow, I don't have the words for this. At that time, I didn't have the words. For months, I didn't have the words for it. I didn't understand what was happening. And when I finally got up the bravery to ask for help, I thought I wouldn't be believed. And then when I was like, I don't know if you're going to believe me. And they said, oh, we've seen this before. I was like, excuse me? I didn't realize this was like a standard thing that happened. And so then I started realizing, oh, wow, just like you said, people need education around this. People need information around this. And I'm well equipped to do that. I'm happy to speak about it. I've never been silent about it. And that was part of what happened to me as I traversed this hell that was extended and acute for a long time, an uncomprehendibly long time, was that I was like, I'm going to write about it. So I've always written about it. I've always been public about it. And so, because I was like, part of how violence functions is that the abuser anticipates that the targeted victim will be silent, that whatever happened will be silenced, usually by the victim or the targeted victim. So, and that aids and supports the abuser's position. So I was never going to help my abuser in that way. So I always wrote about it, and I've been public about it. I represented battered women in the city. I'm the one who writes federal letters and provincial letters and writes for government overviews. And so I've always been very public about what happened. I've never had interest in being silent because I don't want other people to suffer the way I suffered, and I don't want people to experience the atrocities that I experienced. And so now I'm in this strange position where I speak publicly about trauma all day long. And I'm also very, very clear that to do so means ultimately we're destigmatizing trauma, because this is nothing that I did. This is what happened to me. So if we can destigmatize trauma, it's not an them over there situation. It's not a over there. It's a us. Like, we live with trauma and we are responding to the world as people who've experienced trauma or live with trauma. And so if we can speak about that, then we can have more compassion for each other. That's my take on it. And that's the world that I'd like to help produce. Because if we could look after each other with trauma, then there can be more people who transform it into positive experiences as opposed to transmit it down to the next generation. When we transmit our trauma, we're causing harm. The harm people experience, they're transmitting down the line. And that's unjust. To transform it is a real act of conscientious thoughtfulness. So I can say in my case, I've experienced trauma and I never want to transmit that trauma to another person. I will do everything in my power to navigate and digest and metabolize so as to protect and ensure that I don't cause harm.
Excellent. Yes, I love the way that you said everything there. That was perfect. You have a beautiful spirit. You are so you show so much strength in the way that you want to help other people, especially using your own trauma to really help others. And I think that's beautiful. I'm so appreciative that you've shared this time with my audience. Um, I really, what I really need to do is I probably really need to let you go, but I want to say that you have your own podcast, if I remember
No,
right. No, you
I have
don't.
my own website.
Really?
I like,
Yes.
yeah, I have my own website and I have Instagram. And here's my take. We all know someone who could use a hand. We all know someone who's struggling. We all know someone who's would do so much better if they had more support. And so if that you find that person or you encounter that person, please share my service, the Mother Corp, with them. My website is the Mother Corp at, or sorry, the Mother Corp, corp.com. And my email is themothercorp@proton.me, which is secure, coming out of Switzerland. But if we can share these resources with people in our communities, my take is that if we give that person more support, again, the ripple out effect, like I take weight out of the network. I take weight out of the lawyers whose client is having a hard time. I take weight out of the family doctors of the client who's a high needs client. But I take weight out of families and friends because then the person who's suffering gets more support.
And that's perfect. And we'll drop those links. We'll drop them in the description. We'll also drop them on Facebook when we drop the whole video in there. So we will put your information everywhere. Everybody who possibly could need it or thinks somebody that knows would need it, please share. Chavisa is amazing, and I've been so lucky to get to know you. We will talk again, I hope.
I'd
That,
love it. Yeah, that'd be
that would
super
be
fun. You know what?
awesome.
I think it's again, you produce such a beautiful invitation to me, Jason, because as we were talking about today, this is not a female issue or a women's issue. And when I say women or female, I always be inclusive of folks who identify as female or women. But this is not a gendered issue. Gender-based violence impacts all of us. If something goes wrong for me, you experience it too as my friend or family or colleague or lover. And so if we want to um, try and improve the experiences that people are having so that we're the beneficiaries of that, right? Then how can we love these people who are struggling and who have got too much on their plates and who are dealing with complexity? Maybe I'll tell you one story. So I did a workshop recently and I had a potential client come forward. And then I had the person from the workshop say, just to let you know, so and so is like a lot of work, like a lot of trouble. I'm loving that person. Like they just settled right down with me. Like together, we've had lots of successes, like amazing successes. And
Wonderful.
it's, to my mind, it's exactly this. It's a one-on-one personalized service that's tailored to them. And I just help them deal with whatever complexity they're dealing with and help them navigate through so that, again, it takes down the temperature, helps them get more grounded. And also, once we start to resolve some of these complexities, people can start to manage and function better. And so it has a beautiful ripple out effect across the network. It's really important, I think.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. It would make you'd make an excellent teacher because that's exactly what we do. I mean, we usually don't get to do it one on one, but we do like to bring it down and make it comfortable for them. We're not giving it to them, but we're showing them the simplest steps to get where they need to be and being there whenever something comes up that they need help with. It's exactly what you're doing, which is beautiful. It's another education, another teach. And it's something that once you've taught it, it gets that ripple effect because those people are always going to remember that. They're always going to look at people in their situation differently than they would have. And that's a beautiful thing. Keep spreading that love. I love that.
You too.
All right, Chavisa, I'm going to go ahead and sign us off from Beyond the Margins. I can't believe I just did that. From Beyond the Margins, this is Jason and my friend Chavisa. We just want to remind you that we love you all for who you are, not for who the world wants you to be, and we'll do better. We love you all. Bye bye.